Does translation matter? Yes. Growing up, I was raised NIV, and I'd never really heard the whole debate regarding Bible translation. Then, about over 10 years ago, I had a video shared with me of Sam Gipp, who is explaining why there's a difference and why that should matter. And I watched it, and it was pretty compelling. And then started my translation journey. I was raised NIV. Then I heard about the whole translation debate, so I got a KJV. Had that for a while. Then, of course, I dipped my toe. Let's see. I'm trying to think. That would have been KJV. I think I then went to reading Don't Come For Me, but The Message, which I could never take seriously because I would get the giggles because I was so... I know it was written in a way to make it more readable, read like a novel. It was awful. No, thank you. Don't say how anyone can use it. Like, no. Like, if you're gonna make it like a novel, just call it a novel. Don't... I get it's like, quote, paraphrased, but just no. Just... Then, after that, I think I ventured to new NLT, which had recently come out. That would have been a long time ago. And so then I just still sort of meandered from translation to translation. Then I'd get like the whole KJV versus other translations into my brain and revert back to getting a KJV. Then, let's see, recently I ventured into ESV, which I never have read, which I couldn't really get into. Amplified, I could. Amplified, I guess the way it was worded was easier to read. It just, I don't know, it just spoke to me more. And then I landed back into, of course, the KJV topic. And I don't remember who told me about the book, but a book by Gail Ripplinger called New Age Bible Versions or something like that. But anyway, so it like goes through some very major main modern translations and does a play-by-play. It'll show a verse in those translations and then the KJV to show what's been removed or what's missing, word change, etc. And it's blatant. Like, to me, it's real obvious just by glancing at those examples. And I think, gee, like, that's really obvious. Like, how can I, like, see this, have it click, and then just pretend, whatever, I'll just use my NIV or my CSB or whatever, fill in the blank modern translation. And I know some people will be like, oh, well, it's easier the other stuff's easier to read, and it's not a big deal if stuff's missing or reworded, it's reworded so it's easier to understand. And I'm thinking, like, but some of this stuff changes the meaning, the doctrine changes, Jesus being God, virgin birth, a whole bunch of stuff. And it's like, it's not as innocent as people think. Not as like, it's don't worry. And it's like, no, like, I was thinking the other day, like, we have all these different translations. They all say Holy Bible, right? Holy, meaning like sacred. And I'm thinking, like, okay, so the Bible's supposed to be holy, like sacred. The Bible's supposed to be inerrant, meaning without error, and inspirational, etc. And I thought, like, okay, so in that case, we can't have multiple versions all claiming the same thing. Like, that logically is like, does not make sense. Like, how am I supposed to trust, like, multiple translations that are all claiming the same thing? That don't make sense. Like, either one is without error, but they can't all be without error. So that was convicting. And then, let's see. Another thing I thought, like, people get so bent out of shape, like, with the whole KJV topic. It's like feathers get ruffled on either end of the spectrum, and it's like, okay, if these are all supposed to be valid translations, make it easier for everyone to read, like, then why is there this huge division? And I know that there's some KJV only-ish who are, how do I put this? They are not the most, like, kindest in the way that they communicate their view. Very, very in your face, which is not going to go over well with everybody. You know, it's not going to go over well for the average person, because they're going to think, like, I don't want to deal with that. Like, I don't want to hear what you have to say if you're going to come across arrogant and like a jerk. But then I do know some that are KJV or they're KJV preferred. So, and they are more kinder in their approach with explaining, which to me, that does speak volumes. No matter how, like, passionate or enthusiastic you are, the way you communicate the information goes a long way. But no, like, I've mentally thought, like, gee, part of me wishes I hadn't gone down that rabbit hole, because now that I know, I can't just go back to pretending like whatever, you know, like it's not a big deal. Like, I can't go back to just reading the NIV or reading the CSB or NLT or fill in the blank. I just can't. And then another thing that popped out to me was about 2 years ago, I went to this church. Been only a few times. The pastor was using NLT, and I'm like, okay, like, I've used the NLT. And he was reading the Lord's Prayer, classic, prayer, and reading that version. And when he said a part of the prayer, which in the KJV is like, hallowed be thy name, and in NLT it was like, may your name be kept holy. And I sat there and I thought, like, wait, maybe kept holy? I'm thinking, like, no, he is holy. Big difference. And I thought, like, just now, like, wait, that threw me for a loop. So I was like flabbergasted. So then later I emailed the pastor to be like, hey, like, I noticed, this, the wording, seemed like, wait a second, and of course the pastor got a bit, defensive and was like, it's absolutely accurate regarding the translation. And I thought, like, no, like, it's not that it's not, his holiness isn't something that has to be kept. Like, he is. Like, full stop. Like, so, needless to say, I didn't go back to that church. I didn't respond back to the pastor, because I just thought, like, well, he's not going to hear me. So that difference in translation just popped out to me, like, okay, something's not adding up here. And there are some really good YouTube channels that do explain the differences, showing the discrepancies versus missing, words changed, etc. And there are some good ones that are, like, nicely presented, so that's good. But yeah, I've mourned a bit, which sounds really weird, but I think I mourn my innocence before I know, and like, yeah, just having that innocence with reading the word, because it's like, sure, I could read other modern translations that are, quote, easier to read and to understand, yet to me feel a bit watered down. But then it's like, there's that conviction. It's like, no, I can't. So, like, it's sort of like that in between, like, where I feel a little bit nostalgic about my past, because, like, oh, I was so innocent and so young, and, like, you don't think about the heavier stuff And then when it's brought to your attention, it's like, oh crud, like, this isn't as innocent as it looks. And don't get me started on Wisconsin Hort, who helped, they were on the revision committee. And they were occultists. But anyway, that's a big old rabbit hole. But yeah, it's just, I don't know, it's like being outside a bubble. Everybody else is in the bubble, and then you stepped out of the bubble, and it's like, oh, I don't fit in here any longer. Hence why it's hard to find a church, because most churches use NLT or NIV or ESV, and yeah, I mean, sure, I could go bring my KJV and try. I mean, I could, but yeah, it's not easy.